But his thoughts on he had thoughts on a balance of power in government as being a way to help ensure that you wouldn't have that one person that took over the whole thing. He had to find some way to balance the power so that basically, the pie wasn't in one pan. Everyone had a slice. And it wasn't until all the slices came together that anything could really happen. That was really his contribution to things. He started thinking along those lines. And that was 200 BC, right about that time. Then your next big leap comes, 100 years later, when you have Cicero in ancient Rome and the Roman Republic. And we hear a lot today from groups that we need to go and study the Roman Republic because their course, their life, the life of the Roman Republic, that we actually mirror what happened there. That the events that occurred as they went from that republic into the democracy and then into the Caesars, that we are following that same path. So a lot of people say you need to go and study that. You need to look at that. And if you're going to do that, Cicero is probably the guy you want to go and look at. He's the one you want to go and talk about. That's Marcus Tullius Cicero. Try and say that 3 times fast. Yeah, that's just going to be a tongue twister. Again, you can go on to Wikipedia and you can take a look at this. And you can pull up all his information here. And what I see here, and I'm going through my notes here, while Cicero, the humanist, deeply influenced the culture of the Renaissance, Cicero, the Republican, inspired our founding fathers. And when we talk about, we were talking before about who influenced guys like Thomas Jefferson and whatnot. Well, Cicero is one of those guys that influenced him on the whole notion of a republic and how you can take what had been previously written there. You'd have this separation of power. You'd have rulers, but then we would write laws that would bind those rulers. They could only operate within certain parameters. And if those parameters are set right, you can ensure the freedom and the rights of the people, that their rights would be secured. And that was what really Cicero was talking about. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Cicero, he really wrote, he was a prolific writer. We have a large volume, like just large volumes of his works, especially hundreds of letters that he wrote to other Roman senators, Roman politicians, and he's discussing these topics, these concepts of how we can protect and advance the people, because in the Republican concept of Rome, it really was about the strength of being a Roman citizen and protecting the freedoms of Roman citizens. I mean, you throw out his name there, with Marcus Tullius Cicero. That shows you, I mean, Romans had 3 names. You had to have 3 names to be a Roman citizen. And when you talk about the parallels, it's really fascinating, because now to fly on an American flight, you have to have 3 names. With the TSA and the Roman Empire at its height. Later on, after this, when as Rome furthered its expansion and it was expand or die, they had I think it was 27 major outposts in Europe and North Africa and the Middle East, and we as a global superpower have 28, 29 major installations around the world, like super bases that have so many billions of dollars of property and built infrastructure. So these parallels of how long Rome was a republic, because Rome was a republic for 300 years, right? The idea that we are rapidly approaching that 300-year mark. The parallels are very important for us to study, because nothing is new under the sun. We always have these same debates, and the concept it goes down to Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote The Prince. Machiavelli identified in the 14th century this concept that power is cyclical, that the people overthrow the dictator and the people have the power, but then the people become corrupt and they need a prince to save them. So the prince is just and good, and he comes and he saves the people. And eventually, the prince's descendants become corrupt, and the cycle begins itself anew.
Mm-hmm.
And this we see over and over again in history. And Cicero, he wrote about this. He railed about this. He was not a fan of Caesar's attempts to consolidate power. And then after Caesar's assassination, he was against Mark Antony because he felt that Antony would continue in Caesar's path. Of course, little did Cicero really understand that Octavian was eventually going to be the same way. But I guess at that point, that was really the choice they had: the negative, murderous Mark Antony and the good young Octavian. If he had to have an emperor, I guess he picked the right one.
Yeah, yeah, the lesser of two evils is what it comes down to. But he really capitalized on that notion that if we can separate power and then we can restrict the use of that power, we've got a shot, we've got a chance. And it worked until really, the Senate became corrupt. People realized they could, you can, bribe people. The human nature aspect, once that became prevalent in the Roman Republic, it really became the Roman democracy. And you wound up with that point where you had that 49% who were just, thrown to the lions, so to speak. And that was the beginning of the end. So when I look at the description of America today, the United States, and I hear so much pride in the American democracy, it kind of takes me back a bit, makes me go, wait a second, how far along are we in paralleling ancient Rome? Are we at the middle? Are we at the end? Where are we in that slide? And what do we do about it? How do we turn that around? And as our founding fathers said, education, education, education. Bill Clinton was the economy, the economy, the economy. For us, it's education across the board. We have to keep talking about it, and we have to put things out there, and that's why we do programs just like this. Texas, I haven't heard from you in a while.
I'm listening. I'm learning.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Then we're doing something right here. We've got something
That's a
going
good
on.
thing.
Well, now from Cicero here, from Marcus Tullius, I just love that name. It reminds me of something out of a Mel Brooks movie. If you remember History of the World, I think it was part 2. It was absolutely hilarious. One of my favorite movies. But moving on from there, we go to the next thing that I have on my list of my highlighted points of the Charters of Liberty from 1100 AD and the Magna Carta from 1215, and where you have the kings, in England at the time, giving up certain of their authority to appease what would have been a mob coming to take him down. Basically, he gives up some of his authority. You've got another thing called the Charter of the Forest, which allows the people to use the wooded areas to reclaim the use of natural resources. Because again, all that belonged to the king. You couldn't touch the king's trees. You couldn't walk on the king's grass. The king did everything. Your rights, anything that you did was given to you by the king. Which, we look at that today and go, that's crazy. But back then, they actually believed it. This is the way that they lived their lives. Then you have the Confirmation of Charters in 1297, the Petition of Rights, 1628, Sir Edward Coke, and we wind up jumping up to that. Then we jump up to the English Bill of Rights. And people say, ooh, Bill of Rights, I know that. That's our Constitution. That's the Second Amendment. That's the 10th Amendment. This is a different Bill of Rights. And this Bill of Rights dates to 1689. And the reason I bring that up is because that leads us into Mr. John Locke. And John Locke is from 1632 to 1704. And of course, we know our founding fathers of 1776 and the late 1700s there. So John Locke, He beats them by about 100 years. And John Locke goes back and he looks at what Cicero did, and he compares that and takes into account all of these other things that I just read to you, the English Bill of Rights, Petition of Rights, Confirmation of Charters, the Charter of the Forest, the Magna Carta. He takes all that into account and he goes, maybe we have something here. So he writes an essay concerning human understanding about people. And one of his thought was that when you're born, you're kind of like a blank slate. And everything that you encounter throughout your life gets put into this blank slate and fills it up, and then allows you to have these complex ideas and these complex thoughts and put things together. And that's the way the human mind works. He also had the second treatise on civil government, where he looked at forms of government and said, wait a second, there might be another way to do it. And these things are what were common to our founding fathers. Remember before we talked about the things that they had in common. They all read the Bible. They all read John Locke. And John Locke read all of these others before him. So you can see where the baton is being passed forward as we progress from the roots of freedom back with Cicero, and really going back to the Bible, when you go back to the law of Moses. And I haven't included that here because that's a long conversation in and of itself. And we're restrained a little bit by time. So you can see how the baton is being passed forward, and now we're up to John Locke. And John Locke had a profound influence on Thomas Jefferson, so much so that a lot of people say, John Locke was like an honorary founding father. So they probably, he's probably got, some certificate on the wall somewhere saying he's an honorary member of the club. Maybe Skull and Bones, maybe not. But he advocated natural equality for human beings. That's that natural law. Yeah, he put that thought forward. They really pushed on that forward. That natural rights to life, liberty, and property. Now we say life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Well, to them, that happiness, that was property, the right to actually own property. And remember, way back at the beginning of this whole conversation, we talked about the guy sitting at Dunkin' Donuts who's saying, show me where I've lost my rights. Property rights is probably a good place to start. John, you have any thoughts on property rights? I caught him dead silent. That's incredible. That rarely happens. But to own property, have the right to own property means you own it. It can't be taken away from you. If it's yours, if something is yours, it can't be taken away. You can give it away because it's not inalienable. It's yours. You have acquired something. If I, take my paycheck, I go down to the store and I buy a bicycle. I can take that bicycle. It's mine. I own it. And I can give it to that poor kid who had his stolen, right? I can give him my bicycle, right?
Sure.
I own that bike. It's mine. Now, I can give that away. Property rights mean you own it. You can give it away, but it can't be taken from you.
Not anymore.
We talk about rights, right? We talk about property rights. We talk about life, liberty, and property. It's a triangle, and a triangle is the most stable structure in nature.
Yes.
And we have to look at property as part of this philosophy of liberty. And the philosophy of liberty dictates that you have your life. Your life is yours, and you own your life. You can do what you want with your life. Your life is represented in your present. This is where you are right now. That's your life.